the Black Sand Beach of Iwo Jima, February 19th, 1945. About 10 o'clock in the morning, the beach is a killing ground. The volcanic sand is so soft and steep that men sink to their ankles with every step, and vehicles bog down and cannot move. Japanese artillery, mortars, and machine guns dug into the high ground and into the slopes of the volcano Mount Suribachi are pouring fire onto the beach. Marines are dying by the hundreds in the open sand. There is no cover. There is nowhere to hide. A 28-year-old Marine gunnery sergeant is moving across this beach, upright, in the middle of the worst fire any Marine had faced in the entire war. He is short and powerfully built, with dark hair and the build of a man who grew up doing hard labor. He is shouting orders, organizing the disorganized men around him, pushing the assault forward. His name is John Basilone. The Marines call him Manila John. He is the most famous enlisted Marine in the United States. 2 years ago, he was awarded the Medal of Honor for holding a position at Guadalcanal almost single-handedly against thousands of Japanese troops. He came home to a hero's welcome. His face was on posters across the country. He led war bond rallies that raised millions of dollars. He was a celebrity. He had married a Marine sergeant named Lena 6 months ago. He could have stayed in the United States for the rest of the war, safe, training recruits, a living legend. He did not have to be on this beach. He fought to be here. He turned down a commission as an officer, turned down safe assignments, and demanded over and over to be sent back to combat with a frontline unit. The Marine Corps finally gave in and let him go. Now he is on the black sand of Iwo Jima, doing what he came back to do. He has just led his machine gun section off the beach. He has personally destroyed a Japanese strongpoint. He has guided a tank through a minefield under fire. He is pushing his men forward, up off the deadly beach, toward the airfield. And then a Japanese shell lands among them. How does a man who has already won the highest honor his country can give, who has already survived the worst, who has every reason in the world to stay safe at home with his new wife, choose instead to go back to the deadliest beach of the war? And why? That answer begins in a small town in New Jersey, with a kid who joined the Army before he ever became a Marine. John Basilone was born in Buffalo, New York in 1916 and grew up in Raritan, New Jersey. He was one of 10 children in an Italian-American family. His father was a tailor. The family was working class and devoutly Catholic. John was not much for school. He left after the 8th grade and worked various jobs around Raritan. He was a tough, friendly, popular kid who liked a good time and was good with his hands. In 1934, when he was 18, John joined the United States Army. He served a 3-year enlistment, including a tour in the Philippines at Manila. He became an excellent soldier and a champion boxer in the Army. He loved his time in Manila so much that he picked up the nickname that would follow him for the rest of his life, Manila John. After his Army enlistment ended, Basilone came home to New Jersey and worked as a truck driver. But peacetime civilian life did not suit him. He missed the military, and as the world moved toward war in 1940, he decided to enlist again, this time in the Marine Corps. He had heard the Marines were the toughest, and he wanted to go back to Manila, which he believed the Marines could get him to. He joined the Marines in 1940. He trained as a machine gunner, mastering the water-cooled Browning M 1917 heavy machine gun. He was strong enough to carry the heavy weapon and its tripod and ammunition over long distances, and skilled enough to keep it firing under any conditions. He became one of the best machine gunners in his unit. In 1942, Basilone's unit, part of the 1st Marine Division, was sent to the Pacific. In August 1942, they landed on Guadalcanal. The fighting at Guadalcanal reached its first great crisis in October 1942. By the middle of October, the Japanese had landed a large force on the island and were preparing a major offensive to break through the Marine perimeter and capture Henderson Field, the airfield that was the key to the entire campaign. The main Japanese attack came on the night of October 24th and into the morning of October 25th against the southern part of the Marine perimeter. John Basilone was a sergeant in charge of 2 sections of heavy machine guns, holding a section of the line in the path of the main Japanese assault. The Japanese attacked in waves through the night. Thousands of soldiers came out of the jungle and threw themselves against the Marine positions. Basilone's machine guns were at the center of the defense. They fired continuously through the night, mowing down the attacking Japanese, who kept coming in wave after wave. What Basilone did that night became legend. His guns fired so continuously that the barrels overheated and the water in the cooling jackets boiled away. Ammunition ran low. One of his gun crews was knocked out, the men killed or wounded. Basilone moved between the gun positions under heavy fire, repairing guns, redistributing ammunition, and keeping the weapons firing. At one point, when ammunition for the guns ran critically low, Basilone ran through hostile fire to bring up more. He sprinted back and forth across ground, swept by Japanese machine guns and infantry, carrying ammunition to his crews, with Japanese troops sometimes only yards away. When one of his machine guns jammed and the other position was overrun, Basilone repaired the jammed gun himself, then fought to hold the position. At times, he fired the gun himself. At times, he fought with his pistol. When the Japanese broke through and got among the gun positions, he fought them at close range. He held the line through the entire night. His guns and his refusal to let them fall silent were a major reason the Japanese assault failed to break through to the airfield. In the morning, the ground in front of his position was covered with the bodies of the Japanese attackers. Estimates of the number killed in front of his guns ran into the hundreds. For his actions that night, John Basilone was awarded the Medal of Honor. The citation read, in part, "For extraordinary heroism and conspicuous gallantry in action against enemy Japanese forces above and beyond the call of duty, while serving with the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, 1st Marine Division in the Lunga area, Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands, on October 24th and 25th, 1942. While the enemy was hammering at the Marines' defensive positions, Sergeant Basilone, in charge of 2 sections of heavy machine guns, fought valiantly to check the savage and determined assault. In a fierce frontal attack with the Japanese blasting his guns with grenades and mortar fire, one of Basilone's sections, with its gun crews, was put out of action, leaving only 2 men able to carry on. Moving an extra gun into position, he placed it in action, then, under continual fire, repaired another and personally manned it, gallantly holding his line until replacements arrived. He was the first enlisted Marine of the Second World War to receive the Medal of Honor. John Basilone came home to the United States in 1943 as a national hero. The country needed heroes, and Basilone was perfect. He was handsome, humble, and Italian-American, from a working-class family, the embodiment of the ordinary American who had done extraordinary things. The Marine Corps and the government put him to work selling war bonds. He toured the country. He spoke at rallies. He appeared with movie stars and politicians. His hometown of Raritan, New Jersey, held an enormous parade in his honor, with tens of thousands of people lining the streets. He raised millions of dollars in war bonds. He was on the cover of magazines. He was, for a time, one of the most recognized faces in America. The Marine Corps wanted to keep him doing this. He was worth more to the war effort selling bonds and inspiring the public than he could ever be worth in combat. They offered him a commission as an officer. They offered him a permanent assignment as an instructor at a training base, teaching machine gun tactics to recruits, a safe and prestigious job for the rest of the war. They wanted to protect their hero. Basilone refused all of it. He wanted to go back. He wanted to return to a combat unit and fight alongside the Marines who were still in the Pacific. His friends and his family could not understand it. He had done his part. He had won the highest honor in the country. He had survived. He had a chance to spend the rest of the war safe at home. Why would he throw that away to go back to the fighting? A reporter asked him about it during the Bond tour. The reporter pointed out that he could stay home, that he had earned the right, that he did not need to risk his life again. Basilone said, "I am a machine gunner. That is what I am. I am not a museum piece. I do not want to spend the war giving speeches and shaking hands while my buddies are getting shot at. My place is with them." The reporter said, "But you have already done so much. You have the Medal of Honor. No one would think less of you for staying." Basilone said, "I would think less of me Those kids out there in the Pacific are doing the fighting. I trained to be a machine gunner, and I am good at it. And the right place for a good machine gunner is at the front, not on a stage. I cannot sell bonds while other men do my fighting for me. I just cannot do it." He requested transfer back to combat over and over. The Marine Corps kept refusing. He kept asking. Finally, in late 1943, worn down by his persistence, the Marine Corps relented. They let him return to the Fleet Marine Force and train for combat with a new unit, the 5th Marine Division, which was preparing for the invasions to come. While training with the 5th Marine Division at Camp Pendleton in California, John Basilone met a Marine sergeant named Lena Riggi. Lena was a member of the Marine Corps Women's Reserve, serving in the support roles that freed up men for combat. She was strong-willed, independent, and not impressed by Basilone's fame. He fell for her completely. They were married in July 1944 in a Catholic church near the base. They had a brief honeymoon. Then Basilone shipped out with his division for the Pacific. He left his new wife behind. He had been married for only a few months. He could still have found a way out, even then. He chose to go. The target was Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima was a small volcanic island, 8 square miles of black sand and rock, dominated by the dead volcano Mount Suribachi. It was strategically vital because of its airfields, which lay on the route between the American bomber bases in the Marianas and the Japanese home islands. The Japanese had turned it into one of the most heavily fortified positions in the history of warfare, with miles of tunnels, bunkers, and gun positions dug into the rock. The Marines landed on the morning of February 19, 1945. The landing was a nightmare from the first moment. The black volcanic sand was so soft that men sank into it and vehicles could not move. The beach was a steep slope of loose ash that gave way underfoot. And the Japanese, who had held their fire as the first waves landed, opened up with everything they had once the beach was crowded with Marines. Artillery, mortars, rockets, and machine gun fire swept the beach. The Marines were caught in the open, unable to dig in because the sand collapsed back into any hole they dug, unable to advance because the slope was so steep and soft. They died in the hundreds in the first hours. John Basilone landed with the 1st Battalion, 27th Marines. He came ashore into the chaos and the fire. And he did exactly what he had come back to do. He refused to let his men freeze on the beach. He knew that staying on the beach meant death, that the only way to survive was to push forward, off the killing ground, toward the enemy positions. He got his machine gun section organized and moving. He led them off the beach and toward the first Japanese strongpoint. A Japanese blockhouse was holding up the advance, pouring fire on the Marines. Basilone worked his way around it, alone, and single-handedly attacked and destroyed it, using grenades and demolitions to knock it out. With the strongpoint silenced, the Marines around him could move. Then he saw an American tank that had become trapped in a minefield under heavy Japanese fire. Basilone stood up in the open, under fire, and guided the tank through the minefield to safety, directing it foot by foot through the mines while Japanese gunners tried to kill him. He kept pushing forward, leading his men up off the beach toward the edge of the airfield. He moved among them, upright, organizing the attack, refusing to take cover, doing the work of a leader in the worst fire imaginable. The young Marines around him, many of them in combat for the first time, followed the famous gunnery sergeant who seemed to be everywhere and afraid of nothing. And then, as Basilone and a group of his Marines moved forward near the edge of the airfield, a Japanese shell landed among them. The explosion killed John Basilone and several of the Marines with him. He died. Instantly, on the first morning of the battle, leading his men forward off the beach, he had known would be a killing ground. He was 28 years old. He had been on Iwo Jima for a few hours. John Basilone was awarded the Navy Cross posthumously for his actions on Iwo Jima. The Navy Cross is the second highest decoration the Navy and Marine Corps can give for valor, just below the Medal of Honor. Basilone became one of the very few Marines in history to hold both the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross. He earned the first holding a line at Guadalcanal almost single-handedly. He earned the second, leading his men off the beach at Iwo Jima in the first hours of the battle before he was killed. The Navy Cross citation described how he destroyed the Japanese blockhouse single-handedly. how he guided the tank through the minefield under fire, and how his leadership and courage inspired the Marines around him to push forward off the deadly beach. The fact that he had come back at all was the heart of his story. Basilone did not have to be on Iwo Jima. He had already given his country everything it could ask. He had the Medal of Honor. He had a hero's reputation. He had a safe assignment available to him for the rest of the war. He had a new wife waiting at home. Every consideration of self-interest told him to stay. He went back because he could not stand the thought of other men doing the fighting while he was safe. He went back because he believed that a man who was good at something owed it to his fellow Marines to do that thing where it mattered most. He went back because, in his own words, his place was at the front with the men who were doing the fighting. And it cost him his life on a black sand beach on the first morning of one of the worst battles in the history of the Marine Corps. The Battle of Iwo Jima lasted 36 days. It cost nearly 7,000 American lives. It produced 27 Medals of Honor, more than any other battle in American history. The photograph of the flag being raised on Mount Suribachi became the most famous image of the war. John Basilone did not live to see the flag go up. He died in the first hours, leading his men forward, doing the job he had fought so hard to return to. The news of John Basilone's death reached his wife, Lena, in California. They had been married for less than 7 months. Lena was a widow at 25. She never remarried. She wore his ring for the rest of her life. When she died, more than 50 years later, in 1999, she was still John Basilone's wife in her own heart. She had loved him in the few months they had together, and she never let him go. Basilone's hometown of Raritan, New Jersey, never forgot him. The town that had held a parade for the living hero in 1943 now grieved for the dead one. Raritan still honors him every year. There is a statue of John Basilone in the town. There is an annual parade in his memory that has continued for decades. His name is spoken in Raritan with the kind of reverence reserved for a town's greatest son. The Marine Corps named a destroyer after him, the USS Basilone. His name is taught to every Marine who learns the history of the Corps. The story of Manila John, the machine gunner who held the line at Guadalcanal and came back to die at Iwo Jima, is part of the identity of the Marine Corps itself. But the thing that defines John Basilone, the thing that separates him from other heroes, is the choice. He is remembered not only for what he did at Guadalcanal, which was extraordinary, but for the decision he made afterward. He had won. He had survived. He had every reason to stay home, and he chose to go back. A Marine who had served with Basilone and survived the war was asked decades later why he thought Basilone had gone back when he could have stayed safe. The old Marine thought about it for a long time. He said, "People ask that like it is a puzzle, like there must be some complicated reason. There was no complicated reason. John went back because he could not live with himself if he stayed home while the rest of us were getting killed. That is the whole thing. He was the kind of man who could not enjoy being safe while his buddies were in danger. It would have eaten him alive. So he went back, and he died. And I have spent the rest of my life knowing that one of the finest men I ever knew chose to come back and die alongside guys like me when he did not have to." He paused. He said, "I had a long life, children, grandchildren. John did not get any of that. He had 7 months with his wife, and then he was gone, and he chose it. He chose us over all of it. I do not know how to repay something like that. I do not think it can be repaid. All you can do is remember it and try to be worth it. I have tried my whole life to be worth what John Basilone gave up. I do not know if I have managed it, but I have tried." If your father, your grandfather, your uncle, anyone in your family served in the 5th Marine Division, fought at Iwo Jima, served with the 7th Marines at Guadalcanal, or served as a Marine machine gunner anywhere in the Pacific, leave their name in the comments below, their unit, where they served. Don't just leave the name. Tell us one thing about them, one thing they did, or one thing they said, or one thing you remember. The men who landed on that black sand beach deserve more than a name in a database. They deserve to be remembered as people. Subscribe if you want the next story. There are more of them.